church bell rang, but no one had touched it. In the dead of night, the villagers heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, echoing across the cobblestone streets. Then came the whisper, a woman's voice, calling a name that had been buried for over a century. And when the villagers dared to look outside, they saw her, dressed in a tattered wedding gown, her face pale as the moon, eyes burning with vengeance. The ghost bride had returned, but this time, she wasn't just haunting. She was hunting. The rain poured in relentless sheets, striking the rooftops of Hollowford Village like 1,000 ghostly fingers drumming in unison. Inside the abandoned Blackthorn Manor, the air was thick, heavy with the scent of damp wood and something far older, decay that had seeped into the very stones. The ghost bride's presence lingered like a shadow that refused to fade, and those who dared enter whispered about cold fingers brushing against their skin, or the faint sound of sobbing echoing through the halls. Eleanor Blackthorn had been betrayed on her wedding day, 123 years ago. Poisoned by her groom's family to erase a scandal, she died before she could take her vows. But her spirit never rested. It waited, decade after decade, weaving itself into the cursed history of the village, watching generations rise and fall while her rage only grew sharper. Tonight, her plan was nearing completion. Jonathan Hale, the historian who had been tracing Eleanor's story, stood at the manor's threshold, lantern in hand. His clothes were drenched, his breath forming clouds in the freezing night air. He had been warned by the locals, once you enter, you won't leave as yourself. But Jonathan was driven not by curiosity alone. There was a deeper reason. His great-grandmother had been one of the women complicit in Eleanor's murder. The door creaked open before he could touch it. A rush of cold wind swept past him, extinguishing the lantern. The manor swallowed him whole. "Eleanor," he called into the darkness, his voice trembling. From the grand staircase, a faint glow began to bloom. It wasn't warm, golden light. It was pale, almost silver, casting elongated shadows across the decaying wood. And then he saw her, her gown dragged along the floor, shredded and stained with the yellowed edges of time. Her veil clung to her face as though it feared what lay beneath. And when she lifted her head, Jonathan's heart pounded so violently he thought it might burst from his chest. Her eyes were pools of shadow, and yet he could feel them burrowing into his very soul. "You carry their blood," she whispered, her voice like wind through broken glass. "And for that, you must pay." Jonathan tried to speak, to explain, but the air was sucked from his lungs as if invisible hands were tightening around his throat. The walls of the manor shifted. The portraits lining the hall began to bleed, dark crimson dripping from painted eyes. The floorboards groaned under the weight of unseen footsteps, and in the distance, a clock began to tick, though it had been broken for decades. Jonathan stumbled backward, his mind flashing with images, memories not his own. He saw Eleanor on her wedding day, her smile fragile, her hands clutching a bouquet of white lilies. Then the wine, poisoned, her lips staining red, not from lipstick, but from blood. He saw her collapse, her groom's family watching coldly, their eyes empty, and he saw the moment she realized this was no accident. Jonathan's knees buckled. "I'm sorry," he gasped, but Eleanor only smiled, slow, deliberate, and chilling. "You will be the first," she said. The room around him warped again, the air turning almost liquid. Shadows climbed the walls like living creatures, and the cold intensified until it gnawed at his bones. Jonathan could hear voices now, dozens of them, murmuring, chanting, calling his name. Faces emerged from the darkness, pale and twisted, the long-dead villagers who had kept her secret. They circled him. Eleanor stepped closer, her bare feet making no sound on the rotting floor. She raised a hand, and with a flick of her wrist, the lantern Jonathan had dropped reignited, not with fire, but with a blue flame that cast no warmth. "You think you came here for answers," she said, her tone both mocking and mournful. "But you came to finish what began that night." Jonathan realized then, this wasn't just vengeance against the past. This was a curse that demanded blood from every descendant tied to her murder, and he was next in line. The walls of the manor dissolved into an endless void. Jonathan found himself standing in what looked like a church aisle, but the pews were filled with skeletons draped in cobwebs. At the altar stood Eleanor, still in her ruined gown, holding a rusted dagger instead of a bouquet. "Take his hand," she commanded. Before he could move, skeletal hands erupted from the ground, gripping his wrists, his ankles, pulling him forward. Eleanor's veil fell away, revealing a face not rotted, but preserved, eerily perfect, yet deathly pale. The dagger gleamed in the unnatural light. "You will join me," "In the vows of the dead," she whispered. Jonathan screamed as the blade came down. Jonathan's scream echoed in the hollow church, but no sound seemed to leave his throat. The dagger's point hovered above his chest, trembling in Eleanor's hand. Not from hesitation, but from anticipation. Suddenly, a flash of lightning tore through the void, revealing that the stained glass windows were not of saints or angels, but of her. Every pane showed Eleanor in different moments of her cursed history, smiling on her wedding day, lying dead in the chapel, rising again with eyes black as the grave. The skeletal congregation shifted in their seats, bone fingers tapping against wood in an unnatural rhythm. 3 slow taps, 1 pause, 3 slow taps. The sound burrowed into Jonathan's mind, making it harder to think. "Do you feel it?" Eleanor asked, leaning closer so that her lips nearly brushed his ear. "The weight of every soul I've claimed. You are about to join them." Jonathan's voice cracked. You don't have to." "Oh, I do," she cut in sharply, her voice now a cold hiss. "Because when I take you, I take all of them. Every hail, every drop of their tainted blood will be mine." The skeletal hands yanked Jonathan to his knees. His heart was hammering so violently that he could hear the rush of blood in his ears. Eleanor's shadow loomed over him, stretching impossibly long until it engulfed the entire aisle. And then the dagger struck, but instead of piercing his chest, the blade drove into the floorboards with a metallic shriek. The church dissolved again, shadows folding inward, until they were back inside the Blackthorn Manor. Jonathan gasped, his body trembling, realizing she hadn't killed him yet. "Why?" he began. "I want you to see," Eleanor said, her voice now soft, almost tender. "I want you to know what they did. Only then will you beg me for death." The air shimmered, and before Jonathan could blink, the walls turned translucent, revealing scenes from the past. He saw his great-grandmother, young, beautiful, and cruel, handing the poisoned wine to Eleanor on her wedding day. He saw the smug satisfaction in her eyes as Eleanor's fingers loosened around her bouquet, the flowers falling one by one. Jonathan felt his stomach twist. No, this can't." "Oh, but it is," Eleanor whispered. "And do you know the cruelest part? They buried me in my gown, in the very soil beneath this house, so my screams would never leave." Jonathan's knees buckled. His breath came in sharp bursts. Guilt, fear, and nausea tangled inside him like thorns. Eleanor stepped closer. "Now you carry their sins, and I will carry you." The floor beneath Jonathan split open like a mouth, revealing a pit of darkness so deep it seemed to swallow light. From it, pale hands emerged, dozens, maybe hundreds, clawing at the air. Their fingernails scraped the wooden edges, leaving deep grooves. The hands reached for Jonathan, wrapping around his legs, his waist, his arms, pulling him toward the pit. No, please." Jonathan thrashed, but the grip was like iron. His shoes slipped from his feet, disappearing into the black void. Eleanor watched with a cruel serenity. "They will tear you apart and keep your soul for me." Jonathan's head was now inches from the pit's edge. The air smelled of rot and damp earth. And then from the darkness he heard them, the voices of his ancestors, calling his name in unison. "Jonathan," he squeezed his eyes shut. But then a new voice cut through the chorus. One that wasn't calling his name, it was warning him. "Run." Jonathan's eyes flew open. Standing behind Eleanor was a figure dressed in black, face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. In its hand was a silver chain that shimmered in the dim light. The figure swung it, and a sharp crack split the air. Eleanor hissed, recoiling, her form flickering like a candle flame in the wind. Jonathan hit the floor, gasping as the hands retreated into the pit, which slammed shut with a thunderous echo. "Who?" Jonathan began, but the figure raised a gloved hand. "No time. She's bound to this house, but she's stronger than you think," the stranger said, voice low and urgent. "If she marks you, there's no escape." Jonathan's pulse was still racing. "She already has," the stranger cursed under their breath. "Then you have 1 night, maybe less." Eleanor's voice filled the manor again, but now it came from everywhere, above, below, inside the walls. "You can't hide from me, Jonathan." The lantern in the stranger's hand flared with white light, and for a moment, Eleanor's form appeared in the far corner, half her face in shadow, the other half smiling. "This is only the beginning," she whispered. The light went out. Jonathan woke on the cold floor, unsure if minutes or hours had passed. The stranger was gone. The manor was silent, but not empty. Every shadow seemed to breathe. Every floorboard seemed to watch. And somewhere deep inside the house, a soft bell began to ring. 3 slow chimes. Eleanor was calling. And this time, she wouldn't be asking. The camera would slowly zoom into the darkness of the manor hallway, the faint outline of a tattered bridal gown barely visible at the far end, before the screen cuts to black. The Ghost Bride story series, part 6. Coming soon. Keep watching my videos and subscribe channel, thanks.